Well, thank you, everybody. This is actually a bit of a treat for me because I work for a fully remote company. At Buffer, we have about 90 people. We all work from home or from wherever we want, and so it's just good to be able to actually interact with real humans and wear pants, that sort of stuff. So you're definitely seeing me in my best light here. So today I wanted to tell you all a little story about how Buffer's product marketing strategy has evolved over the years. I think it's been a pretty interesting journey. We've had some ups and downs and some challenges along the way. So I'm going to talk through some of those challenges and a bit about what we've learned in the process. So there are three topics that I wanted to cover today. The first is around positioning and how when Buffer first launched the market, we didn't really have a focused positioning, which was fine. We're entering a new category. But as time went on, this really started to cause us a few headaches down the line. Secondly, I wanted to touch on how to identify your best customers, but now I'm kind of regretting that, having seen Karim's talk. I feel like he laid out some really good frameworks there, Karim. So I might just touch on a few of the basic things that we looked at when we went through this project at Buffer. And then finally, I wanted to touch on a few of the things that we're trying at Buffer to essentially grow with fewer but better customers. So thinking less about getting as many customers as possible and more about how can we increase the average revenue per customer. So I figured every story needs a good beginning, right? So I wanted to take you back in time to the early 2010s and think about the social media landscape back then. So Twitter was probably still the number one platform for social media marketers. You had Facebook, of course, which was growing super fast at that point in time, but it was also pre-IPO days and probably hadn't fully figured out the marketing side of the platform at that point. Instagram was around. It was a very small startup then. I think it had like 10 employees or something like that. And I did want to actually ask the room, are there any TikTok users in the room today? Hey, we got one at the back there, nice. So I Googled this, TikTok in 2010. It was actually the number one hit single by Kesha in 2010. So there you go. Random trivia there. So this is a screen grab from our marketing site back when we launched. It's always kind of funny to look at these old designs. So basically, I'm not sure how clear this comes through on this screen grab, but we didn't really have a very clear target audience. We didn't really have a very focused positioning either. You can see that sort of headline in the top left, "Be awesome on Twitter." So who wanted to be awesome on Twitter back then? Pretty much everyone, right? Yeah? So if I was going to kind of sum up our go-to-market strategy back then, I'd probably do it in three ways. The first is that we were just targeting any individual and didn't worry too much about positioning. Secondly, we went to market with a freemium model. So we just wanted as many people using the product as possible. We did have a very low-cost paid option to start with. I think it was like $5 a month or something like that. And then thirdly, we didn't spend a cent on paid marketing or advertising. All of our acquisition was done through word of mouth. So people using the product, hopefully having a good experience, and then sharing that with their friends. So first few years, pretty good, right? Had about $5 million in annual recurring revenue. A nice little growth curve going on there. We also had about 30,000 customers from a whole variety of industries and use cases. So small brands, big brands, marketing agencies, publishers, athletes, entrepreneurs, you name it, right? So things are looking pretty good at this point. Got some nice growth happening. We've got a ton of customers, ton of people using the product. You can probably tell from the title of my talk, this is not where the story ends. This is just the start, really. Thank you. So as time went on, we really started to see some challenges kind of bubble up as the market matured and as our business grew. So I wanted to talk through some of those. So the first sort of big challenge that we felt was roadmap paralysis. So we had all these different customer types with different needs, different use cases, and it made it really hard for us to basically prioritize what to build next. What we ended up doing was we would build a feature for brands, then we'd build a feature for agencies, and then we'd build a feature for publishers. And this really kind of like slowed down innovation. And we kind of ended up building this kind of generic products. Like, it was pretty good for everybody, but not amazing for anyone. Secondly, we really started to feel the pinch in terms of customer support. So we're a 90-person team. We have about 15 people in our customer support team. And they were supporting tens of thousands of customers and hundreds of thousands of free users, right? So they were really starting to feel the pinch. I don't think this would have been such a problem if so many of these users were, if they weren't low margin customers, essentially. But because they were, it made it really hard for us to scale up our customer support team and do it in a profitable way. This is another big one. So I mentioned when Buffer first launched, it was a new category. We had maybe like 2 or 3 competitors in the space. But then as time went on, we really started to see this big influx of new products, new companies, all kind of building their own audiences and serving their own niches. I think there's something like 400 products in the social media management space now, which is pretty wild, right? So it's a very, very competitive space. On top of that, we have some of the bigger marketing platforms. I think maybe a few people in the room today. Shout out to them. Also expanding into the social media management space too. And then on top of that, we have the social media networks themselves building some of these social media management tools. So the market is, it's almost like getting pretty saturated. Meanwhile, Buffer is building this kind of generic product without a very clear position. So I think you can all guess, right? That's a pretty bad recipe. That's my phone over there. So speaking of bad recipes, just want to talk about churn really quick. This is our churn rate over time. You can see it started at about 10% when we first started out. So it slowly went down and actually plateaued at about 5% in 2014. So I'm no expert on churn, right? Is 5% a good churn rate? Is it a bad churn rate? I think, well, it depends on your business model, I think, and what industry you're in. For Buffer, yeah, it's not bad. It's not great either. And I think the key thing is that it's sort of plateaued at 5%, and meanwhile, customer acquisition is getting a lot harder. So you can see there's some challenges there. I really like this graph because I think it really clearly shows like there's 2 phases of Buffer's growth. This is customer count over time. So you can see from 2012 to 2016, got this nice sort of growth that's accelerating. And then in 2016, there's sort of like this almost inflection point where customer count's still growing, but it's not growing as quickly. So this is basically the phase that we're in now at Buffer. So it's really started to make us think like, okay, maybe we need to kind of rethink this whole come one, come all strategy. So these are a few of the things that we are kind of trying at Buffer to grow with fewer customers. The first very important thing is, we wanted to identify our best customers. I'm going to whip through this. These are some very basic, sort of basic characteristics or traits that we looked at. So we looked at the people who are actively using our product. This sounds very obvious and straightforward, right? But we actually kind of learned that we had a pretty significant number of customers who were paying for the products but not using it, which was kind of surprising. Also, very importantly, we looked at customers who were continuing to pay us over time. So we probably all familiar with lifetime value. I think some interesting things that you can layer on top of this is which of your customers are actively promoting you. We use NPS surveys at Buffer to figure that out. And then I talked about customer support a little earlier as well. So I do think, at least for Buffer, it was interesting to see, who's actually finding using our product easy, so that they didn't need their hand held and have that sort of strain on other parts of the business. And then finally, this is something that we put a lot of weight on at Buffer, and this is, are our good customers today going to be good customers tomorrow as well, or in the future? So in other words, do they align with market trends? So you might be wondering where we landed with this. So we do have a target customer now. It's online consumer businesses with up to 500 employees, so kind of steering clear of that larger business enterprise space. Does this mean that we're going to ignore these other customer types that do actually make up quite a large percentage of our customer base? I don't think it means that. I think it means that we're going to just use this target customer to really guide our product development and also our marketing initiatives too. So this is great. We've got a target customer. And sort of speaking of marketing initiatives, one of the first things we did was really try and sort of refocus our positioning throughout all the customer touch points that we have. So we have started creating new top of the funnel content. We have a new podcast for direct to consumer brands. We totally revamped our marketing site with new sort of messaging and imagery and social proof and stuff like that. And then also tweak things further down the line in onboarding and lifecycle emails, stuff like that. Oh, this chart's gone a little funny. What I was trying to show you here is this is basically our annual recurring revenue last year. And you probably can't really see it here now, but when we launched new features, we actually saw like a solid uptick in revenue. So this kind of told us that, okay, when the product team adds new value to the product, specifically for target customers, then we can sort of really see that in revenue, and particularly in expansion revenue. So customers upgrading to a higher tier or potentially moving from one product to another. Speaking of moving from one product to another, we've also started to sell multiple products. So for a very long time, Buffer sold a single product with a couple of price points. We're now selling 3 products. We have a 4th on the way. And the idea is that these products all work very seamlessly together in a complementary fashion, so that, if we have a customer, they might have a subscription to one product. If they add on a subscription on top of that, then they really sort of feel that multiplier value of having them working together. I think pricing's a really interesting one. So we didn't actually experiment with pricing at Buffer for a very long time. We've only really started to do it in the last couple of years. I really like this tweet because I think it does ring true for Buffer. So we actually did double the price of one of our products a couple of years ago, which, was kind of painful to start with. Like, has anyone here sort of sent an email to customers saying their price is going to increase by 100%? Right, yeah, so it's not much fun, but we have felt the value from that in the long run. So I think firstly, with that higher price point, we started to naturally attract just better customers. And then secondly, we've also sort of started to set this precedent that pricing isn't this static thing. Like, it's going to evolve as the products evolve and as we continue to add value to the products. I should also mention, we aren't just increasing prices. We are also experimenting with more flexible pricing systems. So for a very long time, Buffer, I'd probably have 2 price points for a product. Let's just say $10 a month, $100 a month. I lost count of the number of customer feedback tickets that said, hey, $10 a month, not quite getting enough from it, but $100 a month, that's way out of my budget. So we're now basically creating these sort of stepping stone pricing points in between so that hopefully our target customers can sort of grow with Buffer at the rate that they want to grow, at the rate that their business is growing. And then the last strategy I wanted to touch on is lifecycle marketing. So I think traditionally Buffer had been very focused on acquisition and onboarding, especially in the marketing team. We now are thinking a lot more about that whole journey. We actually, within our marketing team, we have a little squad called the Lifecycle Marketing Squad. And we're thinking a lot more about things like adoption, expansion, experimenting with, some of these, some strategies there, like lifecycle emails, in-app messaging, all sorts of stuff. So hopefully that customers have, a really good experience throughout their whole journey. So how's this all going for us? I have a few more charts to show you. This is customer count again. Probably looks pretty familiar. It's really started to flatten out at about 75,000 customers. If anything, it's probably going down a little bit. This is another chart which we are now paying a lot more attention to. So this is average revenue per customer. You can see it looks pretty different. Those first few years, it's sort of down and then up. And then in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, it's really started to grow a lot. We're at about $25 now. We have a goal, a company-wide goal, to get this to $35 by the end of the year. And then last but not least, annual recurring revenue. So again, you can sort of see the two phases of Buffer's growth in this chart as well. That sort of exponential growth to start with, and then that maturation phase from 2016 onwards. That last kind of year or two, you can see it's like the growth's looking nice, but it's pretty bumpy. So I do think that maybe some of these strategies, they're probably going to take a little bit of time to bake in, sort of more like a long-term play for us. The good news is, if you want to follow along, you can. We share all of this at buffer.com/revenue. All those three charts I showed you, you can see, and they're updated in real time with new data every week, I think. And we also share a bunch of other things transparently too. So we share our product roadmap. We share the makeup of our team in terms of how diverse it is. We share all of our salaries publicly. So if you're interested, you can go see how much money I make. And yeah, a few other bits and pieces too. So yeah, transparency is like a core value of Buffer. It's something that I really love about the company. Yeah, it's really good to be able to share some of this stuff transparently with you all today too. So thank you for listening to my story. Some questions?
Yeah, we do have. Yeah, we do have a question. So what process do you go through to decide pricing, and which stakeholder makes the final call?
Yeah, that is a good question. Pricing has been sort of bouncing around in our company a little bit in terms of who owns it. The final call is actually probably made by our CEO. And then we sort of have a bit of a pricing type squad, which involves sort of advisors from various parts of the business, including marketing and product. Me a little bit, not that much though.
Do you have any suggestions on how to work productively with a fully remote team? With lots of offices closing due to coronavirus, this is something that's top of mind.
Yes, this is definitely top of mind. Yeah, so I've been working remotely for like 4.5 years now, so it's almost become kind of second nature to me. In terms of tips, I think the main thing is just you really have to over communicate everything. So I know that communication is a huge part of our roles, right? For me, I almost think it's at least half of my role is just communicating with everybody. And this is like even more important in a remote environment. So I'd say, yeah, really lean into like documenting and over communicating everything.
What results have you seen since focusing on lifecycle marketing?
Yeah. So you probably saw in that chart, like, I do feel like some of this stuff we're still experimenting with. I think what we have seen is just like high rates of product adoption. I think a big focus for me is product expansion at the moment. So trying to get our customers to try new products, to upgrade to higher tiers, and we felt that lifecycle marketing has had a big impact on that. Particularly with emails and with in-app messaging as well.
And I do love this final question. I'm not sure who it came from, but what is the weirdest thing you've seen on a Zoom call while working from home?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of, it's not weird, I've seen a lot of pets and a lot of kids, which is always fun. That's actually like one of the real perks. Weirdest things, I have a colleague who at one point he just basically like ripped his shirt off during a call, and he was like, I just get really hot, and I guess it's good. Like it's good that he felt comfortable that he could do that. It's a testament to the closeness of people at the company, I suppose. But
that's great. Yeah. Give it up for Michael, everyone. Thank you.